Dr. Kirk, thank you for seeing me.
Oh, no trouble. I understand you're a friend of Dr. Miller's.
Yes.
He and I were roommates in college.
I'm doing research in a new book, and Dr. Miller suggested I contact you.
Well, how can I help you?
I understand you have several digs going on in the present time, some of which relate to the Old Testament period.
Well, I'm sure that's true. Mr. McDowell, I'm fighting computer deadlines and labor problems and some financial troubles, so I'll have to hurry this along. However, I need to drive out to the coast this afternoon to meet my daughter and Mr. Tyler, who's supervising the dig south of Tyre. Now, if your schedule isn't inflexible, it'd give us a chance to talk if you wanted to ride along and stay overnight.
I do have a lecture to give late tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, I can guarantee we'll be back.
Well, I appreciate that.
We'll leave here at 2 p.m.
Didn't see you come up.
You weren't supposed to. I was trying to sneak up and startle you. Unfortunately, I was a monumental failure. What are you doing? Daydreaming while the rest of us work ourselves to the bone?
No, I was talking.
Talking? To whom?
To Alexander the Great.
It's finally happened. You've cracked.
I've been tracking down our friend Alexander for the last 6 months. And I think I have an idea what he was up to.
You've gone off the deep end. I should have known. It's not just Dad, it's all archaeologists. All of you, including graduate students, are weird. Do you hear that, Alexander? I said weird.
Well, I hate to break it to you so hard. You're just going to have to get used to it, if you still plan on marrying one.
I sure am. But, please, Mark, you've got to promise me one thing.
What's that?
Alexander the Great has to sleep in the garage.
Oh, very funny.
Josh, here we are. Not a bad spot, would you say?
Beautiful.
Hi, honey.
Wish I'd brought my camera.
Yeah. Tyre would have rested about 20 miles up that way. With the glasses from the point, you can easily see the island that became the promontory. Honey, I brought a guest for dinner. Can you put another cup of water in the soup?
I already put one in for you. That'll make 2. Hi, I'm Judy Kirk.
Judy, nice to meet you. Josh McDonald. Your father's been telling me all about you, giving equal time to Mark, Tyre, and the computer, of course.
This is Mark Tyler. Mark, Josh McDowell.
Mark, how are you?
It's been about 2 years, but we've met before.
It's good to see you again.
I was at the University of Michigan. You may recall that we had a cup of coffee and a long talk after one of your lectures.
Michigan, Tyler, Mark. Yeah, I remember. By the way, did you ever accept my challenge?
This is hardly the time or the place to talk about that.
What's this about, Mark? What challenge are we talking about?
Mark and I got together after one of my lectures, and I challenged him to be an lecturer.
And I didn't do it, okay? It was something I worked through at the time, and then I forgot about it. Look, if you'll excuse me, I have some important things to take care of before supper.
Josh, I'm sorry, really. That was quite uncalled for.
Please, don't apologize.
Mr. McDowell?
Make it Josh, please.
Okay, Josh it is. How about if I show you to your suite before supper?
That's a good idea. You can even give him the air mattress without the leak. If you'll excuse me, I want to go check on the data with Mark.
Mr. McDowell, what brings you to our seaside resort? The food or the accommodations?
Mark,
Yeah?
where have you been? I've been searching all over for you.
Well, I've been right here in this hole.
I think I deserve an explanation for that little encounter at camp.
Now, why is that?
Why? Well, for one reason, because I'm personally embarrassed at the way you treated my guest. And for another, I thought you handled yourself like a spoiled adolescent. Enough reasons?
Look, I came out here to work, to do research, to do serious excavations to determine the movement of the Greek troops after the siege of Tyre. I did not come out here to be lectured to or confronted by some street corner preacher.
Well, now, I hardly think Mr. McDowell's question constituted being confronted by anyone. And with his credentials, which, by the way, are easily the match of yours, you might just learn something.
I doubt it. What could he possibly know about what we're doing out here?
Do me a favor. If you want to be childish, then be childish on your own time. But until such time as you can assume the requirements and responsibilities of an accomplished scientist, don't act like one.
Probably come in right now just as I'm getting this off my chest.
Don't worry. They went all the way down to the shore. They won't be back for a while.
Probably come in and tell me it's time to go to bed. Tuck me in. McDowell can tell me one of my bedtime stories. Maybe one of my favorites, like Noah's Ark.
You're really bitter. Why? What is it that's so threatening to you?
I'm not threatened.
You're doing a pretty fair imitation of it. Remember, my thing is psychology, not archaeology. But even if I were into basket weaving and paper folding, I could see that you've got your back to the wall.
It's just that your father makes it seem worse with his paternal slap your hands in the cookie jar approach. It's enough to drive me up a tree.
That's part of the game, isn't it?
Game? I'm not playing any games.
Well, maybe not now, but you will be. When you become Professor Mark Tyler, then heaven help your students. I bet that you do the same thing to them that he's been doing to you.
Well, I hope not. At least they don't deserve it.
Well, you were a bit harsh with Josh, you have to admit.
Our first meeting was under different circumstances. I was into a different thing then.
What was the big challenge?
I was pretty taken with McDowell's presentation on God. It was pretty solid stuff historically. It got me to thinking. We got together after his presentation, had a long talk. He challenged me to do more research on my own. Then he gave me a copy of his own book.
And did you?
Did I what?
Did you do any more research?
No, not really. I wrote a lot of it off as an emotional response on my part. I was looking for something at the time, and I didn't know what it was.
Do you know now?
I suppose so. I guess that's what I've been doing out here. Out there, on the bluff today.
Talking with Alexander.
You might think it's funny, maybe weird, but that's where I'm at right now. That's where I'm
The mainland city, which is really now well inland, was leveled in BC 573.
That was Nebuchadnezzar's army?
Right. But apparently, these people felt there was enough reason for a city here. Enough access to the seacoast and inland towns. So they rebuilt.
Roughly 250 years separated the first siege from the one we're interested in, Alexander's conquest. In the interim, the city was extended out to the island out there. Then good old Alexander came along and built the causeway and leveled both parts of the city.
The whole story of Tyre is an excellent illustration of the accuracy of biblical prophecy.
Doesn't make any sense why the city was never rebuilt. Its location, the resources, the centrality to central trade routes, that doesn't make any sense.
If one reads the prophecy in Ezekiel, I think the entire sequence of what happened will make a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, you would.
Josh, Dad mentioned that you have a speaking engagement this afternoon. Is that what you're going to talk about?
Well, I'm speaking on prophecy, not specifically Tyre. I'm speaking to a group at the university on messianic prophecy.
I'd really like to hear more of what you have to say.
I would sure like to invite all of you.
Well, that's great.
Oh, I think I'll be tied up with the computer.
Oh, nonsense. Once we get the data there, we've got plenty of time. Josh will be there.
Your father has this incredible ability to speak for all of us without asking any of us.
I don't know if you're aware of it, but you're falling back into the same rut.
What rut would that be?
You're letting Dad push you around, and, well, if you don't like it, Mark, then we ought to tell him. Let him know.
Look, Judy, I appreciate the undergraduate lesson in psychology, but I really don't need you on my case right now along with everyone else.
I'm sorry. You really are touchy about this whole thing.
Look, I'm sorry I'm so irritable. It's just that everything was going along so well until he showed up. I just can't hack McDowell. He brings back a lot that I'd put behind me.
Well, how are you going to feel about that lecture today?
I guess there's no way I can get out of it, so I'll sit through it. I hope it's interesting.
Never realized how important the details of your name and address are. For example, consider mine. I alone am Josh McDowell, 204 East Main Street, Richardson, zip code 75080, Texas, USA, North American continent, planet Earth. Now, planet Earth separates my planet from all the others. North American continent separates my continent from the others on planet Earth. Country USA separates my country from the others in the North American continent. The state of Texas separates my state from all the others. The city of Richardson eliminates all the other cities. The zip code area 75080 separates my zip code area from any others in the city of Richardson. Main Street separates my street from all the others in the zip code area. 204 East separates my house from all the others on Main Street. My last name, McDowell, separates me from anyone else living there by another last name. And my first name, Josh, separates me from 4 billion people alive today. In the same way, but with a lot more detail, God wrote an address to identify his son, the Messiah, and he did it through prophecy. There are approximately 60 major prophecies and 270 ramifications in the Old Testament, all fulfilled in one person, Jesus Christ. For example, in Micah 5:2, God eliminates all the cities of the world but one for his son's entrance into humanity when he says it would be in the city of Bethlehem, less than 1,000 inhabitants at that time. In Genesis 3:15, God says that his son would be born of the seed of the woman. Every other person referred to in the scriptures is referred to as being born of the seed of the man. Now, each of these messianic prophecies which I'm discussing are recorded in the Old Testament and later fulfilled in the life of a carpenter from Nazareth named Jesus. In Malachi 3, God even gives a time sequence. The Messiah will come while the temple is still standing in Jerusalem. It's quite significant that the temple was destroyed in 70 AD and has not been rebuilt. In fact, the only part remaining is the Wailing Wall. The Old Testament predicts many details of the Messiah's life. In Genesis, we are told that God's son was to be a descendant of Abraham. Now, Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. God chose the line of Isaac. Now, Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. God eliminates 50% of the line of Isaac when he chose the line of Jacob. Now, any math major can see the probability building up. Jacob had 12 sons. Of the tribes of Israel when he chose the tribe of Judah. Now, within the tribe of Judah, the line of Jesse was chosen. Now, Jesse had 8 sons. And now God eliminates 7/8 of the family line of Jesse when he chose the house of David to be the line of the Messiah. And it is a matter of historical record that the carpenter, Jesus of Nazareth, was of the line of David. Isaiah tells us that God's Son would begin his ministry along the shores of the Sea of Galilee. According to Psalm 78, he would speak to the people in parables, and as prophesied in Isaiah, perform miracles of healing. In Zechariah, we are told that God's Son would enter the city of David, Jerusalem, riding on a donkey. And as prophesied in Psalm 41 and in Zechariah, God's Son would, 1, be betrayed, 2nd, by a friend, 3rd, for 30 pieces, 4th, of silver, not gold, 5th, thrown on the floor, 6th, in the temple, 7th, be used to buy a potter's field. A prophecy dating 1012 BC describes the manner of the Messiah's death, giving very exact details of a Roman-style crucifixion. This is especially interesting when we consider that the Romans did not use crucifixion until around 200 BC, more than 800 years after the prophecy was made. Isaiah 53 tells us that God's Son would be buried in a rich man's tomb. It also predicts in Psalm 60 that the Messiah would be resurrected from the dead.
It's important, if you're going to maintain your integrity as a scientist, to be able to see through the mumbo-jumbo to the historic fact.
I hardly think that'll be a problem.
Good. I've just seen too many young, ambitious students come over here and suddenly become smitten with the locale and traditions surrounding the various settings.
When I walk among the ruins of yesteryear, I seem to feel the presence of the people who were here. Though I know they're of another place and time, I bet they struggle with their beliefs as I am with mine. morning star. I find myself within these sights I've read about. I see you walking through these places, speaking to the crowd. Wonder what I'd done if I'd been there with them. Later would I join in a crying crucify him? Were you more than a carpenter, more than a friend, more than a prophet or a teacher of men? Were you really the Son of God? They say that you are the promised Messiah. The promised Messiah, the bright morning star.
And in conclusion, it is an historical fact that Jesus of Nazareth literally fulfilled every one of the more than 300 messianic prophecies given in the Old Testament. This evidence overwhelmingly identifies Jesus as God's Son, the Messiah. Now, are there any questions?
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
it seems to me that all these prophecies could have been written after the fact, after it had already happened.
A lot of people say, well, that's a good point. No, it's not. The Old Testament was completed around 400 BC. You say, well, I don't think that's right. Look, if you don't want to say 400 years BC, big deal. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, was done around 150 to 200 BC. And it's quite easy to conclude that if you have the Greek translation 200 years before Christ, well, you certainly had to have the Hebrew manuscripts that contain the prophecies.
You
I think
know,
it's quite obvious.
whatever your
that if you have the
problems are
Greek
with Josh,
translation
he's pretty
of the Hebrew Old
convincing.
Testament, 200
You really
years
believe
before
that?
Christ, and it's quite easy to conclude.
Yeah.
In fact, many of you here are students of archaeology. How far back is the dating of many of the Old Testament Hebrew manuscripts among the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Between 100 and 200 BC.
That's right. 100 to 200 BC.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
don't you think there's the alternative that the historical person named Jesus deliberately tried to fulfill or conform his life to the really rather well-known biblical and cultural expectations of the Messiah figure? Have you considered that option?
Many people bring up this point, but first of all, you would have to say that Jesus was involved in a colossal hoax or lie. And that would be contrary to everything we know about his life and character. Secondly, I think, Professor Kirk, that it's quite obvious that many of the details of the prophecies are beyond human manipulation or fulfillment. I can just see Jesus with Mary saying, "Hurry up, Mary, we've got to make it to Bethlehem. I have to be born there." You know, I think it's rather obvious why Jesus appealed to prophecy to substantiate his claims.
Josh, is it not possible that the fulfillment of these prophecies could be simple coincidence? And if coincidence could account for any of these prophecies, then to get back to your analogy, we have the wrong address and we have the wrong person.
Mathematically, using a modern science of probability, it'd be impossible. Let me show you what I mean. Take just 8 of the prophecies. The probability that just 8 of these prophecies would be fulfilled in any one person is 1 in every 1 times 10 to the 17th power. Now that's with 17 zeros. And I'm sure most of our minds don't comprehend that. So let me illustrate it. Take 2 feet deep of silver dollars. Take 1 silver dollar, put a little check on it, and then throw it in, mix up the entire state. Use bulldozers if you prefer. And then take and blindfold a man. And the probability that that blindfolded man, in his first pick of the entire state of Texas, 2 feet deep of silver dollars, would pick the check silver dollar is the same probability that just 8 of these prophecies would be fulfilled in any one individual.
I find it difficult to accept his remarks categorically. There's a neatness about it that challenges the mind to look further for errors and misconceptions.
Are you going to wait for Josh?
Yeah, I thought I would. I know he hasn't had a chance to have supper. Maybe we could invite him out for a bite to eat and discuss his presentation some more.
I don't mean to sound rude, but I prefer to pass on the supper invitation. I do have to get over to the computer center tonight.
All right. Will you be planning to go back to the coast tomorrow?
I suppose. Although there are a few things I need to take care of in the morning.
By the way, it really wasn't as painful as all that, was it?
No, I suppose not.
Bye. You must be going through something I can't understand just now.
I wouldn't worry, honey. Mark's a bright guy. Sometimes he takes himself a little...
Recently, I had a debate with the head of a philosophy department of a large university. I had mentioned the resurrection in my defense of Christianity. And my opponent rather sarcastically interrupted me and he said, "Look, McDowell, the key issue is not whether the resurrection took place or not. The important thing is, do you believe it happened?" What he was hinting at is that the important thing was my believing, not whether what I believed was true or not. I retorted immediately. I said, "Sir, as a Christian, it matters what I believe, because the value of Christian faith is not in the one believing, but in the object." And I continued that if anyone could demonstrate to me that Jesus Christ was not raised from the dead, I'd have no right to my Christian faith. The concept of saving faith that brings about a relationship with the object, Jesus Christ, is diametrically opposite the average use of the word faith. Most people today, they have the concept of a subjective faith. For example, one of the cliches used is that it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you believe it enough. See, the Christian faith is faith in Jesus. Mark, my talking to you is not going to convince you of anything.
I don't understand. Don't you believe in what you talked about?
Well, of course I do, but it's me believing, Josh McDowell. I can't, no matter how hard I try, believe for you. You've got to do that. And that's a challenge, I think, for you either to accept or ignore.
You mean to consciously believe?
No, I mean that you, with the type of mind and academic background that demands that you investigate every concept before it can be accepted. Check out the Christian faith. Confront Jesus Christ. Dig into the scriptures. Mark, trusting Jesus Christ is something that you have to do.
Understand me, Mark. I'm not against religion if it means something to you, but we're not in Israel to prove that Jesus is the Messiah. We are here to do scientific research.
Mark, the trial of Jesus is one of the best illustrations of his claims to deity. He was asked, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" And Jesus replied, "I am." Pilate said, "I find him innocent. Why do you want to put him to death?" And the religious leaders cried out, because he, being a man, makes himself out to be God. He claimed to be the Messiah. That's why he was crucified. You see, most people are tried for what they've done. But that's not true of Jesus. Jesus was tried for who he was, not what he did. None of the recognized religious leaders, like Moses, Paul, Buddha, Confucius, Muhammad, ever claimed to be God. But Jesus did. And he convinced many that he was the Son of God. See, Mark, people who rubbed shoulders with Jesus believed his claims. He once asked several of his disciples, he said, "Who do you say that I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Mark, I believe you need to deal with the same question.
Yeah, well, that's an awful lot to take in all at once. Hey, listen, I don't want to hog all your time. That's something I might like to look into.
Tell you what, since you bought the coffee, let me give you a copy of my book. The thing has some guidelines in it that might help you do the kind of research that's needed.
Well, did you? Did you accept Josh's challenge?
No, not really. It was based on emotional response on my part. I was looking for something at the time, and I didn't know what it was.
My thing's psychology, not archaeology. But even if I were into basket weaving and paper folding, I could see that you've got your back to the wall.
Look, I came out here to work, to do research. I did not come out here to be lectured to or confronted by some street corner preacher.
You're really bitter. Why? What is it that's so threatening to you?
Mark, do me a favor. If you want to be childish, then be childish on your own time. But until such time as you can assume the requirements and responsibilities of an accomplished scientist, don't act like one.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but you're falling back into the same rut.
Well, what would that be?
Well, you're letting Dad push you around. And if you don't like it, Mark, then you ought to tell him. Let him know.
Tried his room twice. Nothing. Ivan thought he might be over the center, but they called me because they couldn't find him.
It's just not like him to disappear. Oh, I hope nothing's happened. Do you think maybe that he went back out to the site?
Look, honey, I'm certain he'll turn up. He's not irresponsible.
Are you talking about anyone I know?
Mark, where have you been? You look terrible.
Thanks a lot. I usually look about this good when I don't sleep at night.
Then you've heard about the computer problem.
Oh, no. What's happened? When I was over there last night, everything was going all right.
Well, there was a breakdown. And with a schedule, that can only mean you're going to have to stay in town one more day.
Well, what about the crew?
I told Dad that he and I could take care of the crew for a day or two if you stayed here.
What did I ever do to that computer? It does not seem to be my week on any score.
Well, why don't you work out your self-pity with some breakfast? I'm going back to the office and check in and get ready to head back out. Judy, honey, could you be ready in, say an hour?
I suppose. I can put off that running around I had to do till next week. Meet you at the office?
Right. Mark, I'm sorry about the computer, but there's not much we can do.
Well, it's not your fault. I hope I'll see you tomorrow.
Fine. Oh, and would you take the Jeep out and get the brakes checked?
Oh, yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye. Okay. Now I do get to ask the embarrassingly obvious question. Where have you been?
Well, the embarrassingly obvious answer is nowhere.
Well, that's a load off on my mind. What do you want to talk about?
That's cute.
Okay, back to the first question then.
It's just that I have a lot on my mind, and I spent last night walking and thinking.
And talking with Alexander the Great?
No, Alexander wasn't along.
I'm getting the feeling that you don't want to talk to me about whatever it is that's eating at you. Is that getting warm?
It's not that I don't want to talk to you. It's just that everything is such a confused jumble in my own mind that I wouldn't know what to say.
Let me ask one question then. Which probably sounds silly, but I do have to know.
Are you going to ask me if it's you?
The thought entered my mind.
Relax. You have nothing to do with it. When I figure out what's going on, you'll be the first to know.
Okay. Look, I've got to get to the market to get some things. Are you going to be okay?
Sure. Oh, did you talk to McDowell anymore last night?
Yeah, we had dinner together. Had a great time. He'll be out at the Garden Tomb taking some pictures this afternoon.
Why'd you make a point of telling me that? Why should I care where he is?
Playing coy does not become you, my dear. And I'm sure that you weren't out walking the streets all night because the computer readouts weren't what they should be.
Look, I've got a lot on my mind, so what's the big deal, huh?
I'm not going to argue with you. But if it helps, after hearing Josh last night and talking with him and knowing the kind of turmoil that you've been through before, I don't think it's a sign of weakness for you to want to talk more about Jesus. Okay?
Okay.
Hey, Professor. I'll see you tomorrow. And say hello to Josh for me, okay?
Why is it I always get stuck with the check?
Part of the inside of the tomb, and yet right at the edge of the shadow. Why don't we try that? Make sure you miss the shadow. Try that. Right here, and now we get a shot of the width of the wall. Hey, why don't you stoop down to the top? Okay, maybe we get one more. Tell you what, why don't we take a few minutes, get some shots a little later. Okay? Great. I'll be right back. Hi, Mark. How you been doing?
Well, I'm a little ragged at the moment.
You look a little tired.
Well, I've been up all night doing a little soul searching. I suppose that's the proper term.
Could be. Would you like to talk about it?
I really hate to bother you with it, really.
It's no bother. I wanted to have a chance to see how you've been doing ever since I saw you out at the dig the other day.
Well, I was doing a lot better out there than I am in here.
Hope it wasn't my presence that made you feel uncomfortable.
No, it was me creating a situation, not you. You know, I've been here almost a year now. I spent a lot of time in research, and I'm finally close to hitting the jackpot.
That's great. I'm sure you've looked forward to that for quite a while.
Oh, thanks. That's where my problem comes in. You see, I've created my own little world out here. And it seemed so neat until you came along and brought back all those conflicts that I had experienced the last time we met. They haven't changed either. I mean, try as I might, I can accept Jesus as a historical person, especially out here. The names, the places, the feelings all underscore his life, his environment. But it's that final step, admitting that Jesus is the Christ, or God. That's something else.
Hey, I understand. But you know, that is really the heart of the issue. Mark, you remember C.S. Lewis, the Cambridge University professor, and formerly an agnostic? Well, I think he understood your feelings about Jesus. when he said either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. And Mark, to say the things that Jesus said about himself, you only have three alternatives. He was either a liar, a lunatic, or Lord and God. Those are your only options. Now, if Jesus was a liar, then he was knowingly inviting the sentence of death for blasphemy. So no one in their right mind would try to convince the Jews that a carpenter from Nazareth was literally God in the flesh. That'd be absolutely blasphemous to the Jewish mind. You say, well, if he wasn't a liar, then maybe he was a lunatic. In other words, he actually thought himself to be God, but had been mistaken. The psychiatrist, Dr. J.T. Fisher, in a reference to Jesus, said that for 2,000 years, the Christian world has been holding in its hands the complete answer to its restless and fruitless yearnings. In fact, even Philip Schaff, the historian, pointed out that to live the type of life that Jesus lived, that to call him a lunatic, you'd have to exercise a preposterous imagination. Mark, if Jesus Christ was a lunatic, then what about the rest of us? If Jesus was not a liar, and he wasn't a lunatic, then Mark, the only other alternative is that he was Lord and God.
Oh, okay, let's say for the sake of argument that Jesus was the Christ, God. So what?
I understand your struggle. Boy, I've been through it. Several years ago, I thought Christianity was just a big farce. And I set out to refute it intellectually. And after 2 years, I came to the conclusion that Jesus Christ must have been who he claimed to be. And finally, I just said, okay, God, if you're God, and Christ is your son, and you can do in my life what you said you could do, then I want you to forgive me. Take control of my life, change me from the inside out. Nothing happened right away. But about 6 months to a year, year and a half, some real major changes took place in my life. One was in the area of restlessness, where I always had to be occupied. But after I made that decision, just kind of a peace, I guess you'd have to call it a mental peace that developed. And it was not really so much the absence of conflict, but more the ability to cope with conflict. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. I guess I learned one thing, and that is that God's interested in me. And I know also, Mark, that God cares about you as a person. He loves you. That's why his son came to earth 2,000 years ago to demonstrate that he cares about people like you and me.
I just can't seem to understand what's wrong with me. My mind wants so to turn away, my heart wants to believe. I've heard so many arguments from so many sides. I guess the time has come for me alone to decide. Were you more than a carpenter, more than a friend, more than a prophet or a teacher of men? Were you really the Son of God? They'd say that you are the promised Messiah, bright morning star.
And in other news events, there has been an apparent resumption this evening of terrorist activity northwest of Jerusalem. Thus far, 2 persons have reportedly been killed, 7 persons injured, and 2 automobiles destroyed, in 3 separate incidents for which Palestinian terrorists are being blamed. As a consequence, Israeli army authorities advise against traveling this evening between Jerusalem and the Mediterranean coast. This concludes our English news broadcast. The next scheduled broadcast...
Mark, if Jesus Christ was not a liar, and he was not a lunatic, then the only other alternative you have is that he was Lord and God.
Cheers. There you go.
שמע, יש פה מסתובבת שמועה שיש קצת מחבלים באזור, אז תיזהר, מה?
I'm sorry, I don't speak Hebrew. Do you speak English?
Oh, Mr. Tyler?
Yeah.
There is maybe some terrorists around here, so be careful, okay?
Yeah, don't worry.
Mr. Tyler, don't go down from the road and never stop, okay?
Don't worry.
Mark, God cares about you as a person. He loves you. That's why his son came to earth 2,000 years ago. To demonstrate that he cares about people like you and me. To die on a cross for our sins.
Is anybody here? Oh, the Jeep broke down. I had to leave it to get it fixed.
Did you see Josh again?
Yeah, I did.
Well, how about the computer?
That's fine.
Mark, we were expecting you last night. In case you'd forgotten, we do have a deadline on this project.
I'm aware of our deadlines, but sometimes other things take priority.
And just what could be more important than our deadlines?
Well, for one thing, because Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, there are three distinct possibilities. Either he was a liar, or a lunatic, or he was who he said he was.
More than a carpenter, more than a friend, more than a prophet or a teacher of men. Really the Son of God, they'd say that you are the promised Messiah. The promised Messiah, the bright morning star.